Welcome everyone to techteachertips.weebly.com. This is the first video that's going to show you the steps you need to know in order to learn some basic math functions in Excel. When you're working with an Excel spreadsheet, the first thing you have to remember is that every individual cell that's on the sheet is its own special function. Whenever I start to work with an Excel spreadsheet, I always like to get started with a title. So today we're going to be calculating the velocity of the rolling ball. Next thing you need to do is you need to figure out how many columns and rows are necessary to calculate our data. So on the top, I'm going to label trial number. I'm going to put distance, and then I'm going to put feet in parentheses. Time is going to be calculated in seconds. And then our velocity will be calculated in feet per second. Now after you get done putting your titles in across the top, you'll notice that some of them are not showing up. There's a couple different ways that you can remedy this. The first is you can double click on the lines that are in between, and it will go ahead and space out your columns appropriately. Or what you can do is you can highlight and go over to Format and say Auto Row Fit Height and Format Auto Fit Column Width, and it'll go ahead and move everything out for you. Now I like to make my text a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and increase it. And I'm going to go back to my format and say Auto Fit and Auto Fit, and now we're all set. One of the great functions about Excel is that you can pretty much manipulate anything that you want. Across the top here, I'd like my title to be centered. So I'm going to highlight my cells and choose Merge and Center. What that does is it moves everything over and now creates this as one cell. I'm going to take my trial numbers, I'm going to bold those, and down here I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And since these are just numbers, I'm going to click Format Cells, Number, and there's going to be 0 decimal places on this. But go ahead and click here, center it, and then this is going to be the spot for our distance, our time, and our velocity for us to enter our numbers. Now when setting up a chart, it's always easier on the eyes to go ahead and add a box border, and you can click All Borders, and now you have everything set up for you. For this experiment, we're going to need some different distances. So I'm going to enter some experimental calculation numbers that we're going to use for this. So our first, we had 20 feet, 22 feet, 19, 18, and 23. And then I'm going to go ahead and center that. Our time, 1.56, 1.62, 1.35, 1.47, 1.56. And then I'm going to go ahead and center those. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, so I made a really nice chart. It looks good, but I could draw this on paper and I could calculate this out with paper, pencil, and a calculator. Right you are. However, Excel takes some of the work out of the process for you. Remember at the beginning when I talked about how every individual cell is kind of its own entity? Well, what we can do here is I can program Excel in this entity right here to do exactly what I want. Now we know that velocity is calculated by dividing distance by time. So velocity here, I'm going to calculate by placing an equal sign, and then I'm going to click on distance. I'm going to use the division symbol. I'm going to click on time, and I'm going to hit enter. And now my velocity has been calculated for me. And the great thing about Excel is that once you do something one time, you don't have to do it anymore, because I can just drag my formula down and it calculates all my numbers for me. Now all these decimal places are a little extraneous, so I'm going to go ahead and format my cells, go to my number, 2 decimal places, click OK, and you have just created your very first chart using simple math functions in Excel. Now what makes things even more interesting is that we can actually take this data, highlight it, go to Insert, choose a type of graphic organizer to represent our data, and there you go. If you wanted to represent your velocity, you could go Insert, you could do a line, and as simple as that, you could have a line chart. So when you're working with Excel, the one thing you need to remember is that everything you do can be programmed by you. Let me show you one more quick function that you might find very helpful in your daily life. Let's say you're working and you're adding up your bills. So I can go 23.47, 51.94, 31.26, and 27.42. Those are my expenses for the day. Well, now what I want to do is I want to program this cell, but this time I don't have to use the equal sign. I can go over to a function called AutoSum. When I click that, it automatically highlights my boxes for me here. What I could do is I could actually increase or decrease the numbers that are being added, but right now I'd like to add all 4. And then you can see right here in the bottom where it says equals sum, and then there's B9 colon B12. I hit enter, and it went ahead and already calculated that number for me. Since I was adding up my grocery bill, I could go ahead and click Format Cells, change it to currency, 2 decimal places, and now I've got currency. So using Excel is a very excellent program for doing any types of mathematical calculations, adding, addition, subtraction, you name it. Excel can do it. So hopefully you were able to follow along and create your chart, and if you did, you have just completed the first step in creating a chart with Excel. So congratulations, and thank you for stopping by techteachertips.weebly.com.